Okay. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for this session of TPMA's webinar series, Practitioners as Pioneers, Embracing an Entrepreneurial Mindset to Elevate Small Business Support. So in a world where change is the only constant, being adaptable is crucial. Embracing entrepreneurial thinking equips economic development practitioners with agility to navigate and thrive in dynamic environments. And today, we're discussing kind of the new era of small business support, transforming practitioners into pioneers. That way, we can elevate the level of support provided to small business and drive their overall growth and success. My name is Lindsay Blues. I'm a senior project consultant here at TPMA and the former executive director of the Madison Area Chamber of Commerce in Madison, Indiana. And with me today are two of my favorite people to work with, Miguel Garcia and Kathy Lewis. Miguel is a seasoned consultant both in the public and private economic development organizations across the country. He is a new colleague of mine here at TPMA, and he has a long list of qualifications, so I'll only pull out a few for you. Miguel spent 7 years as a program officer and deputy director at the Ford Foundation. There, he managed a community development portfolio that focused on mixed income, mixed race neighborhoods known as Shifting Sands communities. Prior to that, he was a community builder fellow in the Department of Housing and Urban Development's Houston office. And for Harris County, Texas, he worked to train staff in formulating a new capital absorption model that advances place-based and people-based catalyst projects within inner ring suburbs. He also served as the assistant director in the city of Houston's Planning and Development Department and as the executive director of an economic development corridor program in Houston's Hispanic East End. Welcome, Miguel.
Hello, Lindsay.
Kathy is the economic development division manager for the city of Orem, Utah. She plays a pivotal role in strengthening local businesses, attracting new ventures, and supporting local and regional economies. I had the honor of working with Kathy on the City of Orem's Economic Development Strategic Plan, which was an amazing experience. Kathy leads the Orem Business Alliance as well, and the Orem Revolving Loan Fund, focusing on fostering strong relationships with business owners. Previously, she served as Orem's Economic Development Analyst and Management Analyst and held key roles in Flagstaff, Arizona and Kenmore, Washington. She earned her Master of Public Administration from Brigham Young University's Romney Institute of Public Management in 2016 and holds a Bachelor of Arts in Anthropology from BYU. She also serves on multiple boards, including the Mountainland Economic Development District. I also had the distinct pleasure of serving as the project lead for their comprehensive economic development strategy last year. Kathy also serves on the Utah Valley Clean Air Task Force and the Utah Valley Chamber. So welcome, Kathy. I'm super eager to get on with this conversation. So let's get started. We're going to start off with our first question, which is really about the different types of needs that businesses have, and it's ever changing. So let's just start with a little bit of a discussion here of the needs that you're seeing among today's entrepreneurs. And I'll start off with you, Miguel.
Sure. Thank you, Lindsay. And it's great to be on here with Kathy. I learned to respect her in short order. Your great work out there in Utah. I think in reflecting on what I'm seeing out there in the marketplace, one of the biggest attributes for an EDO practitioner is empathy, really understanding where the small business entrepreneur is going, what they're feeling, kind of walking their walk so that you can better serve them. In many cases, this might be a startup. In many cases, it might be a second or third stage financing situation. In any event, it presents some risk. And that kind of risk is something that's very personal to the entrepreneur. It's not just something they turn off at 9 to 5. They live with it with their families. They live with it through their churches. They live with it through their baseball fields or the extracurricular activities. It's always on their mind. So a sense of empathy is, I think, one of the more important attributes we could have to enable them to really build trust with us and our staff.
I also think that we can model communication skills because so many times our new entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs, or maybe individuals who are just starting a business and that hasn't been something that they've had experience in, they need those communication skills, how to negotiate, how to communicate. And that can be really challenging. How to network. I think they're going to be faced with meeting all sorts of different individuals, like businesses to theirs or businesses they'll need services from. And so to be able to understand how to network, to be able to hone in on those skills, and that can also be modeled for them and taught to our businesses. But I think the networking skills are something that businesses will always need.
Mhm. I think, Kathy, you bring up a great point. There's some hard skills and there's some soft skills, right? Kind of like in the workforce sector, are kissing cousins, so to speak. Some of those soft skills you've touched on. Some of the hard skills is making sense of a lot of the data that's out there now. There's so much digital data, and Lindsay, please chime in on this one, that we are feeding to the entrepreneurs for their market studies, for their human resource purposes, for their real estate assessments, and sometimes it could be overwhelming. So essentially not spoon feeding them, but priming them in a way that they could be good consumers of that data is something I know you've done a lot of that work with your chamber work in Indiana, right? Why don't you espouse a little bit on that?
Yeah, I think mostly, here at TPMA, I think I've learned a lot about ways to frame information that's accessible to businesses and easily understood. So, really kind of putting it out there in more simple terms and with graphics that make the data uh, come alive, essentially. Like, why does it matter? And I think that as a practitioner, one of the things we can do is really kind of hone in on our skills to do that, just that. The other thing, I think we've had conversations before, Miguel, about being a navigator for businesses through the processes that they have, information, not just data, et cetera, but also on how they go through processes. They probably already know about how they're developing their product or their service, but how do they get that in the marketplace? How do they manage through permitting processes and licensing, taxes, et cetera? I think that that's a key piece of the puzzle that businesses need as well.
Sure. Building on that, I think for the entrepreneur, it's a journey, right? Very much, we all take journeys in our lives. For the entrepreneur, it's a very special journey, and understanding the mile markers along the way, where to stop at the rest stop, where to eat, where to get new gas, or to maybe take a shortcut in some cases is something that the navigator role that we can play as good EDO professionals.
And Lindsay, I think a key piece in effectively utilizing all this data that comes in from these great digital tools is they have this data, now what? How do they use it? How do they implement it? And I think as EDO practitioners, we can model that because we can use data within our organizations and implement it and model how can they use this data that's coming in to better market their product or their service or better advertise. And so I think it's using this data in a really useful, practical way that's going to make it worthwhile to acquire all the data.
Yeah, also, something that just occurred to me is the opportunities that come out of looking at the data, gaps in the market, and different ideas that can come just by understanding how the data kind of shows what's happening throughout. So, want to kind of talk about different entrepreneurial populations. So, different generations of entrepreneurs or women in business, et cetera. How how are their needs changing within the small business ecosystem? What kinds of things do we need to keep in mind there? Kathy, do you want to start?
Sure. I think in areas where we have multicultural businesses, we need to keep in mind to be able to provide services in their own native language, to provide translation services, translators, to have documents translated into their native language so it's easy for them to utilize and understand, and also have kind of a cultural connection with them, to be able to seek to understand where they're coming from, understand their unique cultural perspective, and also be able to recognize, do we have cultural biases, and do we need to let go of those in order to be empathetic and understanding as our businesses are seeking information from us. Another kind of different part of the population might be women starting businesses. I know it's important for women to have good, strong mentors that are successful and that can just, answer questions and give confidence to women that are upcoming. I also think that childcare is an important aspect for women being able to be successful, for them to feel comfortable and have good options for childcare.
I would agree, and I noticed we have some guests from Kauai on here. Um, Aloha. Cultural competency, cultural dexterity is really, really important. Understanding nuance, understanding practice, understanding beliefs provides a context for people to thrive or folks to have fear in this journey that I mentioned earlier. I think about working with immigrants across the country, immigrant enabling organizations, and how you may have multiple generations of entrepreneurs within the same family, right? And the way the grandfather ran their business or started their business may be very different than the grandson who is just graduating out of community college and has a bright idea for some social networking kind of business or marketing business. So within that family, I'm sure there's lots of discussions. There's lots of this way or the highway, or how do we blend the best of both worlds? And part of what we do in those cases, I think effectively, if we're dexterous in our cultural competency, is to play kind of like a little bit of illuminating the opportunities. They make their own choices. It's their business. It's their risk. It's their reward. But to kind of showcase the different avenues, the different, let's say, trajectories they may have based upon the choices that they make, and keeping it within their cultural context, I think is exciting, but it's also daunting. It's not for everybody, right? It's an acquired skill when you work with certain populations that you have to be respectful, but at the same time, you have to kind of like move it along a little bit sometimes, right? Move it along. So I think that's the exciting part of it. The challenging part of it is being humble enough and learning those cultural competencies and being mindful that it may take some time to acquire that knowledge if you're not immersed in it already.
And Lindsay, also, I think young entrepreneurs, they have a unique perspective and unique desires and needs. A lot of the young entrepreneurs, they want flexible work experiences. They want non-traditional work environments. Some of them, they just may want volunteerism can be really important on company time to be able to give back to their community. And I think if we recognize that as we're providing opportunities for growth and learning as practitioners to these young entrepreneurs, we can more completely meet their needs if we understand where they're coming from.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, Kathy, is we're working with a younger generation of entrepreneurs coming into, and contributing to the economy. I was thinking, Miguel, as you were talking about the different cultural aspects when it comes to entrepreneurs, and we're doing a small business entrepreneurial assessment in Charlotte, North Carolina right now, and I had the opportunity to speak with a couple of chamber directors, particularly the Latin American chamber there, and realizing that they have their own small business ecosystem within the broader small business ecosystem. So how do we, connect the dots between those and expand the opportunities out? They have, as you were saying, the multi-generational businesses and an influx of new Hispanic businesses in the area. and it's making such a great positive impact on the economy. They really can't ignore it, and they really can't. Charlotte can't uh, survive in a vacuum, right? It has
Right.
to connect all of the pieces. So it's one of the things we're trying to do right now with the city of Charlotte. Really exciting project there. Um, I'm kind of looking at those as a former practitioner, uh, practical application, right? Like, what are the practical strategies that we can use to support these businesses right now? What are some of those kind of practical approaches we can take?
Well, I would say depending upon the size of business, because businesses are not homogeneous, or not they're all the same. Um, but generally speaking, there's this, in my mind, when I think about this, kind of four stages, four little buckets, right? One is the assessment and training component. How do we have a good training curriculum? How do our partners have good training curriculums if we don't have it ourselves? Um, what are the outcomes of that? What's the attrition rate when people graduate from the training program? They may say, hey, that might have been too tough. I'm not ready for that. I want to go back and work a little bit longer before I take the plunge. And then the second stage is the business planning, the technical assistance piece, right? What is a business plan? What is the marketing plan? How do we articulate this in simplified terms to the entrepreneurs, but still draw down that important information that we talked about earlier that's out there, the digital information, to kind of fill it up, to make it a bankable idea. And then there's the whole world of financing, right? There's the informal financing world and there's the formal financing world. And so how do you, as an EDO, corral that world on behalf of the entrepreneur, whether it be through a CDFI, Community Development Financial Institution, to an SBA loan, tandem loan, whether it be a micro loan for a home-based business through a local organization, whether it be your local small business development center might have access to funds through university partnership. And so the financing world is very important to protect and preserve the integrity of that entrepreneur so they don't get overwhelmed if they're not bankers themselves, right? It could be a different world. And then the final pillar, I would say, is if they decide to have a brick and mortar store in a community, what does the storefront situation look like? Can real estate be developed, not by necessarily you, but by a partner, where you can reserve certain spaces, call it incubator space, call it accelerators, I call it maker space. But if they need space, who do you go to? How do you mobilize that particular part of the equation? And I think those are the four kind of buckets I think about in a more conventional term about being practical.
And to just spin off that, Miguel, I think as practitioners, we can help to provide information on all four of those different stages. Like, for example, in the training and education, here at the City of Orem, we run a business alliance, but we also network with the surrounding chambers, and we don't try to reinvent the wheel, and we work together. We're very collaborative and we support each other. And so if our neighboring chamber has a fantastic webinar or a presentation coming up, we advertise everything to our businesses to be able to help educate them, to help them get the training they need. We work together with our local universities. We have two major universities really close to our city. We work with technical colleges. We work with workforce services, Department of Workforce Services, and some of the different programs that they have available there. So we see ourselves as the purveyor of information, and as far as helping businesses to put together their business plans. We can utilize for-profit and then also the Small Business Development Center that's located at our Business Resource Center at no cost. So there's a wide range of services available depending upon what the business is able to cover and pay for. And the same thing with finance. I see us as being sort of the connector, bringing together those different resources with these businesses who have the needs, because it can be daunting for businesses. Where do I go? How do I find this information? And we have those connections and those networks and resources, and we can make those connections for them. And then the same thing with storefront. Here at the city, I try hard to be aware of real estate that's for lease and our business resource center also. And then we have another type of a incubator space located in our community, and I'm aware of those. I stay in touch with those individuals who lead the leasing of those spaces so that when businesses come to me, I can provide them with choices and options depending upon the level that they have to spend for lease space.
That's great. I think, we've talked a little bit previously. I think, Miguel, you touched on this about educational partnerships. And I will say for any EDOs or chambers out there that are not working closely with their workforce development boards, that is a relationship that I would definitely be building as you're going along. Somebody put in the chat asking about, what do you do when you don't have very many staff as we go along? Kathy, you might be able to talk to that a little bit as well. But coming from a very small chamber of commerce, I think what I would say first and foremost is curate your resources. Know where your resources are, who you can rely on, who you can be referring to. You can't do it all. So make sure that you have resources. Kathy talked earlier about partnering with surrounding chambers and things like that. If you have a small staff, that's exactly what you have to do to make sure that you are still providing all of the services that you need to your businesses. And I think just make sure that you're not biting off more than you can chew. So definitely have those stretch goals and keep plugging away, but prioritize and make sure that you really curate and constantly curate those resources as you go along. Kathy, do you have anything to add on the staffing?
Yes, Lindsay, I totally agree that as you assist other organizations, they are so willing to help and assist back. And we partner with other chambers and do 2 or 3 combined chambers on a larger event. And then it divides the workload, and also tap into your universities or community colleges because they might have entrepreneurship centers, and those students need opportunities to grow and to learn. And just like a business would take on an intern, I'm sure that EDOs and practitioners would welcome an assistant for a time, for a semester or for weeks or for a month, to help with certain small projects. And then that can go on their resume, and that assists us as an EDO and brings in kind of a fresh approach, because I always love being around students. They have this, pie in the sky way of thinking, and, the sky's the limit, and they're so enthusiastic and energetic, and that spreads, and their enthusiasm and kind of their outlook is really good and contagious. It's good to bring into EDOs, I think.
I'll say one more thing. You may encounter organizations that would be great resources, but because of one reason or another, they may not want to partner with you. That does happen, especially in small town dynamics and things like that. And in those cases, just continue to try to keep communication lines open at the very least, and then utilize other partners that can help out. I want to shift gears just a little bit. And this is maybe one of my kind of favorite questions of the entire webinar that we prepared for. And somebody in the questions asked about different types of technology. We're going to get into that here pretty soon. So I'm going to ask you all about examples. I love examples. So examples of kind of that evolution of business support for practitioners. What are some of the innovative strategies that you've seen some of the practitioners in your area or that you've interacted with? What kinds of strategies have you seen them employ lately that really are outside of the box and creating that filling that need for this next kind of evolution of business needs?
We have a great example at our Business Resource Center here in the city of Orem, Utah. They have a new podcast room. And as we know, some businesses have been able to market and really effectively use podcasting. There's one business here in Orem. It's called Just Ingredients. And they started out doing health podcasts that turned into products that then turned into utilizing their trusted audience as kind of a springboard to see if they were interested in products. And now they're a multi-million-dollar company. So what we did in June is at our Business Alliance, we invited the co-founder of Just Ingredients, Jeff Call, to come to speak to our group on how to utilize and harness social media and marketing. And he went through the whole spectrum and talked about how the business was founded just as a podcast in the beginning and how it turned into these products. And now people are requesting that they create certain types of products. And just as a follow-up with that, our Business Resource Center had a podcast room that had just launched. And so in a following meeting, we explored the idea of what would it take to have our businesses go into the podcast room. And so the Business Resource Center set a price of $25 an hour, and they are teaching classes on how to create podcasts and how to utilize that. So it was kind of the whole package where we talked about technology. We showed how it was successful with the business, and it really did work. And then the potential for them in different ways to implement using a podcast to promote their service or their business or to help brand their business too.
I guess my example would be working with a national network called the Built From Within Alliance. They're based in the Twin Cities, but they have affiliates throughout the country. And they're a group of independent nonprofits dedicated to small business development that are indigenous entrepreneurs to neighborhoods. And the local chapter here in Houston, Texas, where I'm based, they're focusing on a corridor close to historically Black College University known as Texas Southern University. And they have quite a few young entrepreneurs, mostly African Americans, that are coming back to school, wanting to have a dual presence both online as well as storefronts on the corridor. And they have concocted a virtual reality tour of the corridor to essentially show spaces that are significant culturally to the community, but also those spaces that are available for lease and what kind of tax incentives might be available to bring people into that corridor. And so you could literally anywhere in the world take a trip down Emancipation Boulevard in Houston, Texas, 3rd Ward, and see the corridor in all its glory. It's going through revitalization, but also see, where you might fit in as an entrepreneur and what financing might be available for you, what market studies are already put together for most traditional types of retail and small manufacturing, and to provide you kind of an ease of entry into that particular environment. I find that fascinating that historically Black colleges, Hispanic serving institutions, Native American institutions of higher ed are beginning to use this artificial intelligence, virtual reality, to essentially compel people to balance both the old community plus what could the new community offer to the entrepreneurs. And I think that's going to be, a wave towards the future. So you don't have to always do a wind chill survey if you're an entrepreneur. You can literally visit that location from across town and say, yeah, now I understand what's going on there. Let me be part of that.
And Lindsay, I thought
love
of
that
another
example.
example too is artificial intelligence. Some of us might be intimidated by the use of artificial intelligence, but it is being widely used in college curriculum and incorporated. So it's here to stay, so we might as well embrace it. And one idea of the use of artificial intelligence is to be able to more articulately describe and summarize maybe web pages on your website. And I know that I know someone that's a construction business owner, and they've used that to really fine tune the different pieces on their website. And so what I did recently is I connected with a professor at a local university and asked if he would speak early winter to our Business Alliance to teach artificial intelligence. And here's how cutting edge that sector is. AI is so cutting edge that I asked him if he could come up with a title for his presentation. He said, I'd rather wait until it gets closer because we're asking him to speak in February. And he said, because it's so rapidly changing that what my topic might I might consider for the month of August. It won't even be what's cutting edge coming up in February. And so I just, want to be able to provide our businesses with useful tools. And it can be used in something that's so simple as creating messaging on social media to be able to fine tune it using AI, or even presentations that businesses might need to make. It can just empower them and help them to feel more confident and more part of the business world that they're entering into as an entrepreneur.
I think this also connects into that question about having fewer staff for your organization. AI could be incredibly helpful in, giving you essentially more resources and quicker access to those resources than really ever before. I think keeping up with AI technology is difficult. I'm slow to embrace AI. I was just talking to a friend of mine about that the other night, and it's something that I know that I need to do. So I'm, taking steps to ensure that I have some time to dig in and learn it. I think that that's incredibly important as a piece of professional development moving along.
Right.
Kind of get into your normal way of going, but if you have that entrepreneurial mindset, you have to learn what's happening. You have to be up to speed yourself to keep that going.
Right. Lindsay, you bring up a really good point before we move on. That is opportunity costs. For the
Mhm.
entrepreneur, every hour they spend trying to figure out their business model is an hour they can't spend doing something else. Right. And so, as a EDO, I think we have to remember the opportunity costs that most of our clients, most of our constituents face, and how could we fill and balance that opportunity cost equation so they don't have to go and take a full semester class on AI at the local university. Meanwhile, their business is on hold, so to speak, right? So that's an advocate role we could kind of play by bringing in networks at the university or professional service people to supplement that, so they feel like, okay, it isn't either me working on my business or me going to take a class. It could be a little bit of both, right?
I had one last idea for kind of an innovative idea for businesses to be able to implement, and it's the idea of community crowdsourcing. And so it's where there's a platform that's launched for community-driven business ideas, because if a community can embrace a business, then it's more likely to be successful. And the Moab Regional Resilience Center does just that. And Moab is a city in Utah here. And they integrate this community-driven entrepreneurship and development into its economic development work that they do. And I thought of it's a small example, but something that the city of Orem did in two different instances is they appealed to residents through their social media platforms, Instagram and Facebook, and they polled their businesses or individuals and said, which types of restaurants would you or business would you really like to see come into Orem? And the two that came to the top, one, it took 10 years to bring them to Orem, but we finally got this business in Orem, and another was a grocery store chain. And so with the support of the community and with crowdsourcing, you can really help to drive kind of business ideas.
Mhm.
Yeah, one other kind of thing I think that's on the edge and that would be a good opportunity for practitioners to dig into and become, a pioneer, so to speak, on uh, is really looking at sustainability, right? Sustainability, resilience, et cetera. How do you support your local businesses and your small business ecosystem to ensure that it is resilient? I know, Kathy, you had mentioned previously, earlier, a circular economy accelerator, and I'll let you talk about that in just a second. But I think, business resiliency is so incredibly important, planning for and then how you bounce back from any kind of disruption. We all experienced that during the pandemic. It's the easiest example to point to. And so there are different things that you can do. We actually just posted a little article about that on our website, that you can kind of dig into to think a little bit outside the box on. how you build resiliency among your small businesses. You want to talk for just a second about that
Sure. The
accelerator?
city of Park City in Utah, they really encourage businesses to engage in the space of renewable energy and eco-friendly packaging design and product design. And I think in some instances, it takes the support of the local city to be able to integrate that into their long-term plan. That has to be something that's important to the city. But when it is, it can provide great opportunities for businesses to have that extra support. I know you mentioned that I'm part of the Clean Air Task Force, and it's a local county-wide task force. And as part of that, they run competitions for the cities to encourage businesses and individuals to each year it might be different on water conservation or something that's really ecologically friendly, some type of a topic, and they pursue some type of a competition that brings awareness to businesses and to individuals of kind of ecologically friendly topics. And I think that that can be really helpful.
One other thing that we do here at TPMA is called a design sprint. Some people know about it and some people don't. We do design sprints a little bit differently at TPMA because we've adapted them to engage stakeholders in strategic planning. But it's essentially, started in the tech industry, and it's really about product design and testing. Definitely, I would suggest looking into, learning about design sprints and how that can help your local businesses. And then, also working on your own for your economic development organization, working on your own strategic plan and doing engagement in a way that helps your stakeholders to be able to be innovative with you. I think is an incredible opportunity as you move forward, and that's another way that you can be, kind of cutting edge and move forward.
Mhm. I wanted to maybe answer this last question that's in the question and answer period here. Is small business and entrepreneurship becoming a high priority for economic developers? And I'd say it always has been in my mind. It's always been a tool in the toolbox of a larger toolbox. There has always been catalytic projects, the expansion of a convention center, a ball stadium, a port development, a major, let's say, mixed use project that is very shiny and it does have merits and does have scale. But I think also what we've learned over the last 20 years as practitioners is that as you do that, you also have to have a sense of equity, a sense of social justice, a sense to make sure that there are other opportunities for those solo entrepreneurs to benefit from that. And so a whole field has evolved out of this equitable development, opportunities for all, social justice, whatever you want to call it. And it's refocused, I think, on the indigenous entrepreneur in their communities and how do we rekindle that, reposition it in ways that are not necessarily combative as a pushback to big box development, but complements it, right? Recognizing that as neighborhoods do start to see new investment, those are new consumer bases that could be marketed to by indigenous entrepreneurs. So that gentrification, even though very often is a very dirty word in urban context, it could also be shaped in a way that creates opportunities and sparks those for the residents that want to be entrepreneurs that have been there for a long time. So I do think it's the timing of this work is critical because markets become more fluid. But I also think the basic premise behind it is still got a very strong bedrock to it for many, many years. And so I would just say we're trying to update, recalibrate, refashion, and elevate these new approaches. And most important from an EDO perspective, make sure that we present our best game to the entrepreneurs, right? How do we sharpen our skills? How do we stay relevant? How do we essentially become that kind of tip of the spear for them so that they feel they could trust us in our judgment with the new tools, with the new approaches, but the age-old premise of small may be good, small can be good.
Yeah, and to that point, somebody mentioned the question, in the chat about, EDOs kind of shifting their focus to small business. Is this a big trend? And it is. So traditional EDOs used to be, very much focused on how many jobs you can create and, attracting new industry, retaining the industry that you have. All very, very important still. But when we're talking about small businesses, small businesses collectively, they're significant employers. They employ almost 46% of US employees. And they contribute maybe I think I'm looking at 70% of the increase in jobs just from March of 2021 to March of 2022. They're really incredibly important to our economy. They're really kind of the baseline of our economy. If we don't take the time to not just support our small businesses, but nurture them and help create more, we're missing a ton of economic opportunity for our local communities.
I
And
agree, Lindsay, and I think a really key point is being active and good listeners to our small businesses. Because in order to understand their needs, we have to get to know them. That's the relationship building, that's the networking, that's doing appropriate polling and appropriate, interaction so that we can understand what their most important priorities are. And one question I like to lead with when I talk to businesses is, what keeps you awake at night? What's your greatest concern? And when we ask those types of questions, then we can focus our education and our training to meet their needs in general, to help them become stronger. And just to speak to your point, I know it's true in our city that 100 small businesses equal one of the larger businesses oftentimes. And so we can't discount those small businesses. And sometimes now with the inclusion of social media and all the digital marketing, a small business can rise fast within 3 to 5 years to become, a national business or a very international business within just a short period of time. And so to be able to offer services to both the large, medium, and the small locally owned and operated businesses is important.
I think the other thing that I'll say is, again, coming back to my experience at TPMA, has been that the other kind of shift of EDOs looking at the whole picture of economic development, right? They didn't used to delve into housing and childcare and all of these different pieces of the puzzle, but it affects the economy in such a real kind of vital way. You have to look at things holistically. It has to be a holistic approach. And that's where that community partner piece of the puzzle really comes into view. So there's a question in the chat about advice in helping those nonprofits that you're working with grow to be able to handle larger projects. What do we think about that?
That's a pretty loaded question. Scaling an organization is always a judgment call by the board of directors if it's a nonprofit, or board of overseers if it's a small public entity. I would say take bite-sized morsels. Don't choke on anything too quickly. Identify those channels or those avenues that seem promising that you would like to investigate as perhaps a line of business, a new line of business, or deepening an existing line of business. Another piece of advice is, put together perhaps a series of concept papers internally to just kind of formulate your ideas and allow members of the staff and others that are close to the organization, some of your partners, to add on to that concept paper. So all of a sudden now you have perhaps a little bit of a business plan yourself to expand into that new line of work. Just like you are trying to support your entrepreneurs, you're trying to support the nurturing of your own idea as an entrepreneur. And I will put a plug in here that that's becoming more and more important now. The EDO is a public entrepreneur, thinking like an entrepreneur, not just on behalf of your clients, but on behalf of your organization. And so what's good for the goose is good for the gander, so to speak, in this case, right? And the final thing I would say is, do a little pilot here or there. Try a little something. don't put all your eggs in one basket, but do a little pilot and maybe one site, one location, or one case study, see how it works out. Learn from that. Maybe you shut it down after a while because it doesn't reap the benefits, but at least you learn something. Be a learning, thinking, and doing organization. Like that's a healthy trajectory for a nonprofit to think like an entrepreneur.
And I think also for nonprofits to grow, to help them tap into different training opportunities. If their staff is small and if they're multi-trained, that just gives them that much more opportunity to work on projects if they can gain those skills and that knowledge. And I think our EDOs are a great place to start to get that kind of knowledge. So many webinars and classes are free or very little cost. And so they can have a wide range of training opportunities and, think outside the box, because in the smaller organizations, people tend to wear multiple hats, don't they? And they take on different roles. And so I think with those small nonprofits, if they can think outside the box and think, well, that's a, individual that might have an interest in that, let them have opportunities to be trained and gain experience in different things.
I'm going to mention something, Miguel said, put out pilot programs, start a pilot program, something that as an entrepreneur, you have to take risks, right? So entrepreneurs are not typically risk averse. They really kind of go for it and jump in. It's sometimes hard to convince a board of directors to support you in, new ideas and things like that, but do your best to, rope everybody in and get some good buy-in on taking a risk here and there. I think that that's incredibly important. And when you have a lot of nonprofits in one community and it seems like maybe there's some overlap, we see this in a lot of the small communities that we work in. I'm working in one right now in Michigan that, they they have some nonprofits and they're really struggling again with that capacity and they need some capacity building. They rely on volunteers a lot, which is great. But when it comes to the daily grind of making progress, you have to have some staff and some capacity to move forward. So, in some of those cases, really kind of look at it from again that holistic point of view and community planning. Where does it make sense to merge? And I know it's hard to let go of that territorial piece of the puzzle where you care so much about your own organization and want it to stand on its own. But sometimes you gotta merge just for the betterment of the community as a whole. And again, we're seeing that a ton in the small communities. They don't have capacity unless they do that for even applying for grants or doing the reporting on grants. It's a major issue for rural communities.
Mhm. Let me address this question here by an anonymous attendee. Mr. Garcia makes a good point. The entrepreneurs are so busy. How can cities provide help outside the normal hours? Very good point. The old answer I would have given would have been, well, let's try to have, let's say, a happy hour, a little mixer in the evenings, or maybe a breakfast before people get started at the local restaurant, and we could talk a little bit and network there and do the things Kathy really does very, very well, and that is how people have peer-to-peer exchanges, let's just say, right? But I think in this day and age, and keeping in line with the topic of our chat today, is the pioneering way that I'm seeing now is that I'm seeing many small business schools, not the large ones, not the Harvard, the Yales, or the Stanfords, but smaller ones that their graduate students in entrepreneur studies, they're doing work study programs serving as chat line folks. They're 24/7 for entrepreneurs that want to ask questions. And the city or the EDO contracts with the university so that these graduate students are available to the entrepreneurs to answer the questions on behalf of the EDO that may not be opened at 11 o'clock at night, right? So it's kind of like a 24-hour chat line. And you develop a relationship there. And at some point, the student says, that's as far as I can go. I'm going to hand you over to the person at the EDO and I'll get involved, or Lindsay gets involved, or Kathy gets involved. But there's a little bit of sourcing there to provide a little bit of a relationship building online. And that seems to be working quite well in a few places. University of Houston has that. Also, Trinity University down in San Antonio has that same approach as well. So there are ways of being available outside normal business hours to address that opportunity cost issue I brought up earlier in the conversation.
I'll build on that just to say, just like this webinar, we're recording it. We're going to put it up on our YouTube channel. Not everybody can take an hour out of their day at 3 p.m. to come to a webinar like this, but they could come to our website. They can go to, and watch it later and still be able to contact us and ask us questions if they want to, or set up a meeting. So I think that that's a really good accessible way. Make those that information accessible outside of normal business hours and whenever entrepreneurs have the opportunity or the time to look, and keep reminding them of it. A lot of people with their social media posts, especially EDOs, tend to get into this kind of, well, every single post that I put out there has to be brand new content, but it doesn't. You can recycle your content, especially that content that's incredibly important, just to keep, you have to keep that message and those resources in front of your businesses all the time. There's another question in the chat about e-commerce affecting businesses. I absolutely, says, do you think that e-commerce has changed how cities think about small businesses? ED professionals didn't used to see small businesses as primary jobs, but that's not true anymore. Today, small businesses can export their products and services to customers in other cities, states, and nations if they have a website and selling product on Amazon, Etsy, or other online platforms. Do ED professionals see it this way? I would say yes, absolutely. And again, that comes back to making resources available to small businesses, especially in letting them know what opportunity exists to sell, use e-commerce and sell their products more widely. Tons of small mom and pop businesses offer services and goods online and in a storefront. So it doesn't have to be either or, it can be both. And in this economy, it pays to do both.
And in fact, in our city and in our county and across the state of Utah, e-commerce takes up a big sector of our real estate sector, and it's in the flex warehouse space. So it's become a really good position for e-commerce businesses to have a flex warehouse where part of it has a small retail spot and then office space, and on the back of it is, like shipping bays, and they package and they ship their product out of this one space. And it's a great kind of all-in-one package building for businesses, and they do employ a good number of individuals in those flex warehouse spaces.
Right. I would say another sector within this e-commerce that's booming right now is arts and culture. We're seeing a lot of creative artists, collectives around the country, around the world, taking advantage. They could sell directly to the consumer. They don't need to go to galleries. They don't need to go to gift stores. They have a great online presence. They're very creative people as artists. And so once they get into this space, they really do start to thrive. And all of a sudden they start to have hyper growth problems, like finding the right site building, like Kathy just described. Can you do it in my backyard? No, you don't have to go get a flex space. You need to have a shipping department. You need to have inventory available. And so that hyper growth is something that I've seen in the art and craft, art and culture development space has really, really blossomed, I'd say, in the last decade. And folks are shipping to Africa, from Africa to Asia, to the Amazon basin, and it's become, I'd say, some serious revenue for these entrepreneurs now, where they have now are kind of at a fork in the road. How much is too much before you lose cultural authenticity, right? So they're dealing about their version of gentrification is a little bit different than the real estate version, but they did grow very quickly and they did adapt to e-commerce very effectively, I'd say.
So we've talked a lot about different skills that practitioners should be looking for. We talked about professional development, but I think that there may be some more skills that practitioners should be looking to develop right now. So I just want to open that question up and I'll throw it to Kathy.
I think as a practitioner, we need to be flexible and adaptable. We have to come up to speed in the digital world, in the digital age, to understand it and to utilize it. I know just recently I tapped into using AI, Chat GPT in particular. I was giving a presentation probably 6 months ago, and I wanted it to be really punchy and good. And I wrote it out a few times. I couldn't get it, and my neighboring employee in the office next to me, he's a planner. He said, "Have you tried Chat GPT?" And I said, "What's that?" So I started using it, and it is so much fun. It just expands your opportunities of what you can do. And so to develop those skills and to actually use them, and also to learn how to be flexible, to learn out of the box thinking and to experiment with that, because that way we can provide kind of out of the box ideas for problem solving to help our businesses as they might be challenged with problems that they're facing. And I think we need to continuously learn how to listen, and to listen to understand, not to listen to give recommendations to businesses, because that's a definite important skill if we're going to meet the needs of our businesses of all different kinds of backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, age group, economic statuses. We need to seek to understand so we know how to meet their needs. And then we can tap into those resources that we've developed to be able to steer them in different places. And I don't think we have to feel like we have all the answers. We just know the people that have the answers. That's the key, and know where to send our businesses for the answers.
I couldn't said it better myself. I'll just add, I feel like the future of this work would be nimble. You got to be nimble because things do change quickly from client to client, from transaction to transaction, from political administration to political administration. You got to deal with changes in council members and governors and presidents upcoming in November. So you have to be nimble. Two, I think Kathy said it in several words, but I say meet the entrepreneur where they're at. Make sure you meet them where they're at, because they each have, like I said earlier, a different journey. And their journeys are not complete. If they were complete, they wouldn't need us, right, at this point. So their journeys are something that we have to meet them along the way. Now, we can't always hold their hand through the entire journey, get in the passenger seat while they're driving, but we need to know where they're going to go when they stop, be there to greet them, be there to kind of bolster them, and be there to kind of say, okay, the signpost up ahead is the next major stop and major fork in the road. And then the final, I guess, attribute I would say for us as EDOs is to maintain our passion. This is very hard work. You have to be passionate about working with this population of entrepreneurs, because someone will drive you crazy with their crazy ideas, but they just might work. Some of them, you may have to drag them to the water to drink because they don't seem to be as motivated as you think they should be. So you got to basically be passionate about it. And with your passion, hopefully it'll rub off on them and it'll be mutually reinforcing. And together you and your clients will learn to work together and learn to basically interlock your personalities, interlock your styles of work, and hopefully they will see the value in your value proposition.
Thank you, Miguel. So I am a big proponent. That's a great piece to kind of transition us here. I'm a big proponent to start on time and end on time, and we are at 3:59. So if I didn't get to your question, if we didn't get to answer your question, or you have additional questions, I dropped my email and Miguel's email into the chat. Please feel free to send us a quick message as we move forward here. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, this will be available available recorded on our website. Please share and let us know how we can help you moving forward. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.